If you were taking a test, your study skill is to write your own test, ask your own questions and write the test. It's like that when you're preparing for Joint Commission and when you're looking for hot topics or things that they can notice right off the bat. And so it's almost like playing a game like Where's Waldo? If you poked your head in the door and you looked around in Decontam or Assembly or any area, what's wrong with this picture?
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal to help you bite dirty. Every instrument, every time. Whether you are tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go Beyond Clean.
On this episode of Beyond Clean, we speak with Angela Lewellyn, Director of Development and Research at Advantage Support Services. And Hank, we're going to wrap up this season around instrument safety and quality by talking about accreditation. What do the surveyors know? What do they want to find out? What are they going to be looking for related to this niche theme that we've built this entire season around?
If you've ever seen The Lion King, when you say the words accreditation, it's kind of like when they say Mufasa, and all the hyenas are like, ooh, Mufasa. Yeah, so this is like accreditation. Ooh. There are specific implications around this theme of instrument quality that I really want to dig into and just get the conversation started. We're not going to have enough time to cover all the bases, but I want to get everyone out there thinking, what more can we do in really hardwiring solutions on that topic? And then encouraging everyone to critically think about how they intake instruments, how they process instruments, how they train on instrument quality. That's the big goal for this episode.
All right, stay with us. Last episode of the season. We're going to be right back after a short break with Angela Lewellyn. I'm Justin Poulin.
And I'm Hank Balch.
From 17 Studios, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
Joining us now is Angela Lewellyn, Director of Development and Research at Advantage Support Services. And here's the topic everyone wants to know about. That's right, it's accreditation. But we're going to really dial in on accreditation around risks related to instrument safety and quality, which is the theme for this season here on Beyond Clean. So, Angie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this with you guys.
So, as we dive into this conversation, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, yeah. I'm Angela Lewellyn. I've been with Advantage for 20 years or so. Advantage Support Services. We're based out of Nashville, Tennessee, and started in the operating room and kind of got spilled into an account, actually a project in sterile processing, and then fell in love with it. I mean, just fell in love with the people, the processes, the education, and then just started to develop this side sub-business really for Advantage because we're in the operating room mainly and created this product for sterile processing. I sit on an AMI committee, several voting committees currently, and have written and published for ISHM when they were ISHM and HSPA now and OR Magazine and just different things in the industry, and really just always trying to promote the technicians to grow as a professional in a profession and really gain momentum for them, give them some tools and really help them grow in what their passion becomes.
Yeah. Well, you touched on a lot of things that we care a lot about here, people, processes, education. But there was another one that you said that doesn't always come up on these shows, but it's passion. and really fueling that passion because, sometimes it's a grind, and that ties right to accreditation. Honestly, there's nothing like a survey to really put everybody into the grind, or sometimes if it doesn't go well, the response and the process improvements, as you mentioned, that have to go into place can be pretty intense. Can you talk about your experience with preparing for those accreditation surveys to hopefully make that as seamless and I don't want to even use the term relaxed, but as seamless and uneventful as possible?
Well, honestly, it could be seamless. And this is our approach to preparing accounts and clients' SPD departments for accreditation, is that we, as a team, technicians, leads, supervisors, and directors or managers of the department should invite Joint Commission in. They should actually walk them through and tour them because this is their house. And they really should take ownership and a lot of them, many of us, take ownership of our house. And so now we have a guest in our house, and that's how we should approach it. There's a lot of fear built around Joint Commission, and we're getting inspected and move that cart out of the hallway today because it usually lives there kind of thing. But I think our approach when we prepare accounts for accreditation is to huddle a lot. There's a lot of preparation. Give ownership to the technicians because accreditor surveyors are not going to necessarily interview the manager. They're going to interview the technician. And the technician should be given some tools and information so that they have a level of confidence and to know that if you don't know the answer, you don't have to know the answer. You have to know where to get the answer. And so we help accounts do little tricks, right? Like set up an education station in the department with a computer. Put the policy and procedures in a little book. Put the IFUs or access to them on the computer or put them in a book that they can just pull something. Policy and procedures. All of these foundational things, the technicians should be part of the process to prepare and not just Joint Commission's coming. We got it, and all these administrators come and walk through our department. When the administrators walk through our department, we should tour them around as well. It's good practice. So there's a lot of things, little tricks that you can do, but ultimately it's about the culture of how you prepare and how you really get your department leaders, supervisors, technicians ready for Joint Commission. And my partner, Jameed Billingsley, said we should always be ready for Joint Commission. Because we should just be doing it right.
That's right. Always prepared.
Yes. So I think Joint Commission, the biggest challenge we see is the cultural approach and the mindset around them. You should do things, right? You should do best practices, have the right tools for inspection, the right size brushes and diameter and length and all that stuff in decon. Have a borescope available. We've seen borescopes that they have borescopes, but they're up on the third shelf way in the back in the thing. And one lady knows how to use it and we never really do. And, have it out at your education station or an inspection station. And there's some things that you can do to really prepare for best practice.
I love that comment though about the technician ownership. Is such a critical theme, and it's come up again and again and again through the seasons on Beyond Clean. And I know we're going to have a lot of technicians listening to this show because of that kind of fear factor that you've mentioned. It's kind of drilled into us, from the moment of our first day of orientation, like, hey, we got to get this right because of patient safety and everything else. But there's also going to be these scary people that come visit us once every 3 years, and you really got to get it right because they can, shut us down or, people can lose their jobs. And so it almost becomes something, though, at that technician level that can be easy to say, well, that's my manager's job. That's my director's job to figure all that out. I'm just kind of here in the day to day. and, hope everything goes well when the accreditors come. So I really appreciate you tying those two things together that, hey, there is a role, and it's a critical role for these frontline clinicians to play, in not just doing what they're told, but actually owning the process and the improvement process and all the culture that you're describing. So as we go into some of those things, you mentioned a couple already, but some of the things that these surveyors look at when they come into sterile processing. And let's start at the high level, and then we'll go a little bit more specific. But what are those kind of general highlights? Everybody always wants to know, what is Joint Commission, what is D&V paying attention to this year? So what are some of those highlights that you've kind of heard in 2022 that are some of the big kickers?
Well, I think the year before, and it's carried over into this year's point of use care and transportation. But I think this year, the big hot topic is endoscopy, scopes, handling, inspection of lumens, following the IFUs and all the many, many, many steps. And I think that's the biggest focus that I've seen and heard of. But, there's other things that they're looking at initially, policy and procedures and competencies. And what those competencies should look like is a full competency. And so we really educate a lot of hospitals on what a competency is and how it should be. A one-pager with a check next to a bunch of tasks is not a competency. It is a checklist, and nobody signed it. Did they sign it? Is there a demonstration, a post-demonstration? Is there a score, a grade? What's their competent level? And so a full competency is a great thing to put on the to-do list to get ready for Joint Commission and complete those and successfully fill them out. And then again, to have each technician speak to it, because if they're giving you a return demonstration, they're giving you a return rationale for that task as well. And that prepares them to answer questions for Joint Commission. So just working on the competencies, full competencies, is really a great way to prepare technicians for Joint Commission as well.
All right, so let's zero in on the theme of the season, which is going to be instrument safety. And really, safety is a quality metric, right? Or quality indicates safety. And so what are some things that is on the radar, gets a lot of visibility? You were just talking about where surveyors are focused. Well, when it comes to instruments themselves and that safety, or even like high risk areas that everybody should be paying extra special attention to. Like I know labor and delivery, maybe about 2 years ago, was a high emphasis for a lot of surveyors. And, it was particularly, I saw a lot of surveyors looking at tape on labor and delivery instruments. There seemed to be a focus on that. And that would tie very much into this theme. But can you think of others, especially that are relevant today, where they're saying, okay, related to instrument safety and quality, these are some things you're seeing some trends of in terms of focus areas?
So I think that one of the things we can focus on and prepare for Joint Commission for safety is inspection tools. I think it's really, if you're looking and thinking about just endoscopy or even lumens that get sent and rigid scopes and decon, the thing that they're looking at is, they can look at is the length and diameter of the brushes that you're using, the availability, and then following the IFU for that. If it can be turned over and used again, or if it's an SUD, a single-use device, do we throw it away or do we reuse it? And if we reuse it, now here's all the tricky parts about what we do. We have to document how many times it was cleaned. If the IFU says, hey, you can only use this 10 times, how do you know it was 10 times? One of the things we teach is put a measuring cup next to the automated dispenser in decon with the detergent, because how do you know it's measured and putting the right amount to concentration of water? So you're measuring that amount. And do you do that once a month? What does your policy say? And again, where do you document that? And, if you have a tracking system, that's a great way you can integrate all these things, but many of us don't. And especially we don't in decontamination. And so how are we tracking that and how are we documenting that everything in decon is contaminated? So where are we talking on a piece of paper? Is it laminated? Is it something? Where are we sending those reports? How are we getting them out the door? All those things to prevent cross-contamination. When we teach about decon, think about it like this for Joint Commission, that these bugs want to live, they want to live. They're surviving, right? And so if you put yourself in their shoes, how are they surviving and infecting you? What are you doing for you? If you walk through simple things and you kind of hear them over and over and over so many times that we don't pay attention to it anymore, but don't wear your mask on your chin, wear it on your nose. Little things like that we get accustomed to in our day to day that we really need to notice. And it's like taking a test. If you were taking a test, your study skill is to write your own test. Ask your own questions and write the test. It's like that when you're preparing for Joint Commission and when you're looking for hot topics or things that they can notice right off the bat. And so it's almost like playing a game like Where's Waldo? If you poked your head in the door and you looked around in decontam or assembly or any area, what's wrong with this?
What are you going to see?
Right? What is wrong? What's the biggest thing that right off the bat, if they can see, low hanging fruit, really evident when they put their head in the door, they're going to start walking around and looking for more stuff. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. Once it's a waterfall effect, right? Or a domino effect. Once they find one thing, they start digging because they know there's got to be more.
I really appreciate your comment going back to the brushes. Like that's something small, but so critical to this instrument quality, instrument safety conversation. And it's very complex. Like I hope folks were listening in the way that I was trying to hear you with new ears, right? And just like if I heard this for the first time as an administrator or just another clinician outside of sterile processing, that assumption that sterile processing is, simple, like, how hard can it be? They're just washing things and then they're packaging them, then they throw them in this big autoclave and you're done, but just the brush conversation on how many unique lumen sizes in the length and the diameter of the lumens do we have? And then how do you hardwire and ensure that every lumen size that you have, there is a connected brush size in stock at the point of need in decontam every time that device comes through? And then how do you document that actually is going on? I mean, that's like one slice of a million things that we do in sterile processing. And yet on the accreditation side, to your point, that can be the one thing that they go back and they see all these brushes and there's 3 sizes and they know that's not going to cut it. And they hey, how often are y'all cleaning those or throwing those away? And they're like, I don't know. It's like, boom, you're done.
They just sit here all mingled together for weeks.
Yeah. They're all twisted and bent and you're like, oh my gosh, just the brush thing can kill you. But I'm going to kind of transition here to my next question. And this goes into, again, the theme of the season is investing in instrument safety. And there's an investment that comes even on something as small as brushes, because the reason oftentimes you don't have a million different variations of brushes is those babies are not cheap. Even though they're small things, especially if you're not reusing them, if you don't have a disinfection process, if you're single-use brushes all the way through, that can add up very, very quickly. And so my question kind of goes to the cliche in the industry of we know nothing opens up that wallet and the budget on the administrative side as quickly as getting cited by the Joint Commission. I remember when I was a manager, part of me was kind of getting cited wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing in the world if it helps me
get you some help. That's right.
It's kind of a weird kind of thing. Why is it so cliche that if we get cited, the Joint Commissions are the administrator is actually going to start spending the money that we need. Why is that so common?
Unfortunately, it's not proactive, right? It's reactionary when the sky is falling and things start happening is when we spend the money, right? We're going to get cited and it's going to cost us more. And I think, there's two views of this. First of all, being proactive, the managers or leaders in the department have to show the cost, the dollar amount, and the return on investment, or the savings that they're going to have. Here's an example, Hank. We have a bunch of wet loads. So we bring the steam quality guy in, and we do that, right? We test the quality of the steam because now surgery is complaining, surgeons are complaining. You see how that affected
cases
revenue.
Are getting canceled. Yeah.
Some are canceled. That's right. So then they might do a trace study or a process audit or something like that. And then they buy a sterilizer. So all this money is spent on when we could show the cost of all of those three things, which is thousands and thousands of dollars, time, customer satisfaction, team satisfaction in the OR and in SP, and show the cost of that and versus just doing an audit. Just doing an audit costs you a couple $1,000s or whatever it's going to cost you versus all of that backlash from a wet load. It really is in your head. Okay, what do I want? I want education. What's it going to cost me to get an educator dedicated as an FTE? And what's the return on that investment? And then start showing if we don't have an educator, this is what's going to happen. Turnover, no growth, errors in customer satisfaction or dissatisfaction rates go sky high. So you have to show the dollar amount if you want to promote your department and what you want.
And that's such an interesting kind of conversation that crosses all aspects of the industry, because like you start talking dollars and you're talking supply chain. And of course, like we're talking about administration on the vendor side as well, though. A lot of the vendors are the ones that have the justification, they have the costs, they've done the studies, right? That they can bring and say, hey, like this new technology or this new widget, it can save you this much time or this much effort. And it's kind of frustrating though, still from the clinical side has got to come down to dollars and cents. But you're right, practically speaking, there's nothing that gets the attention quicker outside of a Joint Commission citation, right? Because that's what we're saying. Like, we don't want it to get to that. We want to be proactive. We want to make the case creatively to justify these decisions. And it's going to take that kind of financial acumen. And honestly, like that's where a lot of department leaders like me ended up in the manager's chair. We didn't have any training on how to create a budget, how to justify spend. And in an episode that we did a couple of interviews ago, we interviewed a president of a hospital who started his career as a sterile processing tech. And so one of the questions that we asked was, in that conversation, like how do you learn those skills in creating the budget? And then importantly, keeping in mind that it is a zero-sum game. You're competing for the same dollars that, pharmacy is competing for, that the operating room is competing for, the radiologist is competing for. So your case has got to be a good case. It's not just like hey, like we're friends, give us some money down to sterile processing. It's if we invest in the new sterilizer, like you mentioned, that means pharmacy may not get their new like automated whatever, or the OR may not get their thing that they're wanting. So it's a challenge. It really is a challenge. And that's probably why, back to the question, that, so many of us end up not getting those things proactively, and then it leads to the citation, and then administrators don't have any choice. They have to kind of say, okay, let's spend whatever we need to spend to fix it.
So one of the things, Hank, we do is we help hospitals create or enhance their multidisciplinary team. And so when you are requesting or have a need that's a capital expense, or even another FTE like an educator, we interview and have some meetings with risk management, infection preventionists. And the infection preventionists, all of the equipment, staffing, education, whatever you want in sterile processing directly affects infection preventionists because it is all prevention of cross-contamination or reducing, the bioburden and this, bugs, superbugs, microbes. So it directly affects them. And if we can get infection prevention to jump in with us and present our case, they can also, especially if you're new or not trained, haven't been exposed to writing a budget or writing a proposal like that, they can jump in and help you too. You have some resources in your hospital that you can really reach out to, bake them some banana bread and bring them up, something like,
yeah, no, building those relationships is very important.
Yes.
Yeah. And, that's a theme, honestly, that has come up a number of times too on the show. The power of that duo that you're describing, that infection prevention and sterile processing coming together and aligning not only on like what they want to accomplish, but just like sharing education, because many IPs, just like on the sterile processing side, we don't have the financial training when we become managers and directors. A lot of IPs don't have the sterile processing training when they get into the IP role. So just opening up your department resources and your experience into your IP and pouring into them and investing in them to make them better at their jobs, that's a great kind of symbiotic relationship. And then when it comes time to budgeting and preparing, to your point, in these Joint Commission surveys or D&V surveys, then that's where the magic really happens. So I love that. I want to go back here to something that you kind of started the interview with, but maybe we can spend a couple more minutes to flesh it out. The impact that personal accountability and culture has on these policies and practices, right? So we've been talking about how do you approach instrument quality and safety in a way that is going to ultimately impact patient safety for the good, but then also not get yourself cited at the same time. But just having great policies is not going to do it. And, just having the right equipment is not going to do it because there's people involved. So what impact does this culture and that personal accountability you described, like how does that drive compliance to doing the right things that are already laid out and spelled out in your competencies, in your policies, et cetera?
If you think about the technicians, they're the most valuable part of sterile processing. You can write policy and procedures, create a foundation for your department, or even get the best equipment. But the thing that makes it work are the technicians. These are all just tools to help the technician do a great job. That's all they are. They're not the way to go. The technicians are the way to go. We're investing lots and thousands of dollars and not investing in the most valuable part of sterile processing, which is the technicians. So one of the things we've done is we developed a position called a quality assurance technician. And it's another FTE in your department, but that quality assurance technician supports education, supports technicians. Hey, if they skip a step, or if a tray comes back without a filter and it goes to Johnny, the QA tech, quality assurance technician, can help re-educate. It supports the manager, but also they check trays randomly every single day. The trays are put together. They're put on a staging cart before they're put on a loading cart. It is another step, but I'm going to tell you, another set of eyes are very, very important. And they process trays as well. So they have multiple jobs, but it's been critical to many of the departments we've staffed. That quality assurance technician. And
I love it because it's proactive.
Yes.
It's not relying on the OR to catch the errors. Because so many of our quote unquote quality assurance is like based in the operating room when it's kind of too late for the errors to be found. If a missing instrument, incorrect tray assembly, like that's not when you want to find them. You want to find them at that QA stage that you're talking about prior to it even leaving the department. It gets found, it gets identified, it gets fixed. And then you've got that data and that education to take back to the team and say, hey, we're seeing a trend on everyone's forgetting their filters or forgetting their indicators, or, not putting tip protectors. All that's very, very critical. So that's a great takeaway. As we move here to the wrap, I know the time has flown by. We could talk about this a couple of hours here, but we love giving practical takeaways for folks that are tuning in. As I said before, we're going to have technicians, managers, hopefully a couple of administrators out there tuning in, maybe even some accreditation surveyors. Could you provide like one or two practical takeaways that you would hope anyone listening to this interview could take back to their team today and start making the positive changes that we've been talking about?
Sure. So I think one of the most helpful things we've seen, change a culture in a department, but prepare for accreditation. It serves several actually goals, is to engage the technicians in huddles, in education, in multidisciplinary teams, in rounding. So in administration, we invite administration to come down and round once a month or something, however they do that, right? They should round in SP, get to know face to face the technicians that serve their hospital and their patients, and then invite the technicians or key appointed technicians, not necessarily leaders in the department, to the rounding, because again, they're rounding in our house, and it's another way to prepare them to invite Joint Commission in and round with them and point things out, KPI.
And build the confidence and all that. Yeah.
Technicians should be given ownership of their department by 10-minute education and huddles. Hey, Johnny, you teach, the IFU for the detergent we used today. All you have to do is read the back of the bottle label. But what happens is now Johnny is really, he's understanding and engaging, but speaking out with confidence about his skill set and learning how to become an expert in his field. Right.
Yeah. I'll tell you, one of the more formidable experiences I ever had as a manager was doing just that and assigning different topics to my staff members to present. I'll admit I had some low expectations of some of my staff members. I'm just going to say, I was like, yeah, I'm going to make them do it, but this is probably not going to go very well. But I'll tell you what, there was this one tech in particular, like she had been with us for decades, 25 up to maybe 30 years. We assigned her to educate around the trach tubes because she just loved doing the trach tubes. These are like the reusable ones, like where you had to wrap the string and everything. And she killed it. I mean, like she went home and like made this whole board with all the different sizes and everything. Like she came and just like absolutely knocked it out of the park. And everybody in the department, like including me, but everybody else was just standing there like, oh my goodness, that was amazing. We had no idea that, that she had it in her. And it worked. Like you're right. Like we saw the confidence, the ownership in her just bloom. And then everybody else in the department, like then it kind of moved up a notch of like, okay, that's the standard of, educating our team members. So then it just huge positive, shift from that one experience. But I've never forgotten that, like tremendous amount of value.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. The last thing I would say, Hank, to your viewers is have a team meeting with administration and SP leaders about supporting the team by supporting local chapters, HSPA, national conference, conventions, or even we've had several of our hospitals host the state chapter. And they, got a little conference room and a couple vendors jumped in and got them lunch. And there's things that we can do to promote the profession. Recently, I had an experience about employee satisfaction and that they got pay raises, they got an adjustment for inflation, different things, right? But the thing that makes these nurses at this one place stay and not travel, like a lot of us are doing, is the ownership that was given to them for their department and the recognition, and they get vested in reaching these goals for their community, and they stop traveling. These nurses decided not to, we can start to bend that trend a little bit if we really understand the value of who we have in our community that serves our community.
I love that. And it is true. Like, you can just see it as you described it. If you're just coming in, clocking to a machine that you're not going to impact, and like you're just a widget and no one really cares what you think or what your skill is or like how you can improve the process. It's not your process. It's not your department. Then yeah, why would you not go travel and make more money? But if you flip that around as you're describing, and this is your baby, these are your friends and family that you're caring for at the back end of all these instruments into the safe surgeries, you can impact the process. You can change the culture. That's a whole nother ball game. So terrific interview, Angela. Great takeaways here. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions, particularly around the accreditation piece. So if anybody has any questions they want to throw out to you, how do they reach you? What's a good email address contact for you?
You can reach me and there's a contact list in who we are in the AdvantageSupportServices.com site. My email is there, and it's very long. It's A.M. Lewellyn, Lewellyn at AdvantageSupportServices.com.
That was Angela Lewellyn, Director of Development and Research at Advantage Support Services. And Hank, really targeting accreditation around instrument safety and quality today in this conversation. Boy, the cleaning brushes piece, what a key takeaway. I know we talk about it all the time. And if you ever had an in-service from whoever supplies your brushes, they talk about having the right size diameter brush for the right size lumen. But honestly, it's confusing sometimes. You don't necessarily have the specs of the device and trying to stay on top of all of that. But, surveyors technically should be and could be looking at that.
Yeah, Justin. And as I mentioned, that's just one of a million different things they could look at all across the board on instrument quality. And that's just instrument quality. We're not even talking about the equipment. We're not even talking about all the other things, the chemicals that go into it. So it really slices up a million directions. But if you can get the process correct on something like the brushes, you can scale that solution, that approach to training and competencies and hardwiring the process all across all the other instrument quality. If it's pill packing, if it's inspection, if it's purchasing, if it's repairs, but you got to get the process down at the beginning. And I love the big takeaway for me on this was the ownership piece. All about that frontline clinician ownership of the process. That's where the magic really happens.
Yeah, well, it's another great season in the books, and you just continue to find great ways to take new spin or new angle on conversations like accreditation. Sterile processing is a complex industry, and so there's never a shortage of good conversation. And we had so many throughout this season. I also want to give a shout out to Bobby for filling in for me during a busy podcast season. I know he has done just an amazing job filling in there. And honestly, Hank, you could almost do these on your own now. You're such a pro. So that's going to do it not only for the show, but for the season, as I mentioned. And I do want to tell everybody that we would really appreciate it if you downloaded the Beyond Clean smartphone app for iPhone or Android. It's by far the best way to listen to the show. You can click the category like the Beyond Clean podcast and search for topics, or you can check out articles on the go. There's bonus content in there as well. Just so much great stuff. So make sure you download the smartphone app. But if you're really preferential to Apple, Amazon, or Google Podcasts, we certainly exist there, as well as Stitcher and iHeartRadio, Spotify, and actually pretty much any podcast application that you like to use. Just search for Beyond Clean and you're going to find us. But another great thing about the smartphone app is bonus content. Some of these episodes have documents attached. And so if you click on that gift box, you'll be able to see if there's any bonus content related to that week's episode. And finally, we love feedback, right, Hank? We keep coming up with these themes. We keep coming up with different ideas for guests and shows, but every season we get to talk to somebody I've never met before that has so much great insight. So if you've got any recommendations for somebody maybe that you think would be a great guest on the show, we'd love an introduction. If you have an idea for a topic for the show or even a theme for the season, all you got to do is send an email over to info@beyondclean.net, and we'd love to hear from you. On behalf of Hank, Bobby, and myself, thanks for a great season here once again on Beyond Clean.